All right, good afternoon. Hopefully it is not a blustery day in most of the places that everybody is. It is looking kind of drizzly out here in Reno, but hey, it's not snow. So today is our 8th session of these 4-H orientations, and we're going to talk about two completely different topics, but I think that they're both important topics that we discuss. The first one we're going to talk about is working with underserved or vulnerable audiences. And just start out, I am not an expert in this field, but I am, I think that there's some key pieces that I'd like to share with you as we go about our programming within 4-H. And then I'm going to be sending you some resources that we have available. It is a topic that is getting a lot of attention nationally, the whole idea of inclusivity. And so we've been spending a lot of time as state 4-H program leaders talking about this. And so I think it's important that we talk about it, not only with ethnic diversity, but we also, there's a lot of other vulnerable populations that we work with. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen, and I need to get this PowerPoint up and going. Let's see. Okay. So as we look at this, how can we build a healthier, food secure America while we're also looking at our workforce? Sorry, I know I'm not looking at the camera, but let's see. Okay, here we go. So what is an underserved audience? Well, this is the underserved populations, and these are, I always say, we used to use the term at risk, etc., but these are, at risk. They've determined that pretty much every young person is at risk. But when we think about underserved audiences, so that can mean a variety of things. They're not limited to, they can include but not limited to members of immigrant or ethnic groups. And I know in the Las Vegas area that is a big piece. There's a lot of people that move into the community that maybe aren't that are immigrants. They can include rural youth, urban youth, the unemployed, LGBTQ plus community or youth, and then the homeless. And NIFA they have a working group working on vulnerable populations. And they are right now, their term is vulnerable populations, and they're looking at groups that are exposed to high risks, both developmentally, emotionally, physically, mentally, and socially. So I think part of that is what language do we use? And one of the pieces that I'm going to share with you, and I'm going to stop sharing this really quick, and I'm going to pull up. Okay, so sorry, I have to go back and share. It's kind of a crazy system. All right, so this is a document. This was a fact sheet that was put out by USDA and NIFA. USDA is our United States Department of Agriculture. NIFA is the National Institute for Food and Agriculture, which is where Cooperative Extension and 4-H, where we reside. And so you can see that they have a history of vulnerability, what those vulnerable populations are, the dimensions. This is just to me, this is a really good fact sheet that will go in more in depth than I could share with you in the amount of time that we have. The other piece that I really like about this is there's a lot of resources that they've given you. Like I said, they have got a task force that is working on this. Oh, I thought this one had it. It must be the next one. Of people from across the country that have an expertise, really, to me, in working with vulnerable populations. And so they are going to be, or I'm going to share that with you, like I said. Okay, and so So you will be getting a copy of that fact sheet. There's another one that is that I'll share with you. It's just a kind of an infogram, and it talks about working with those diverse audiences. So just a couple of things that I want to share. When we think about our numbers for our underserved or our vulnerable populations, currently there are about 110 million minorities, which is about 35% of the population in the United States, or in the, I believe, in the country. And then one in 10 counties has a minority majority population. And if you look at that, 55% of the minority majority population in the South is African American, 43% are in the West are Hispanic, and 34% in the West are Asian. So the U.S. is projected to become a majority minority state for the first time in 2043. And so what that means is that there would be basically our majority, the races would switch. You can't really say majority minority because those populations will no longer be a minority, they will be the majority. And those of us that have been living in this white privileged world will then be the minority. So by 2060, there will be 225 million minorities, which is going to make up 57% of the population. So it's just something to keep in mind as we think about our programming within 4-H. I was just having this conversation with somebody the other day, I think it was Karen actually, about the fact that we struggle in some of our communities getting people to realize that 4-H is not a white middle class rural program. And so as we are working on programming, even when we look at even our rural communities, trying to expand our programming to reach those audiences. This is probably forefront in my mind as well, because a lot of you, and Louisa, I will get to your question, I see that. They are a lot of our, or this is in the forefront. If you haven't heard, Nevada is going through a federal civil rights audit. It's just something that the USDA does about it seems like every 20 years is what's happening. They're getting to do more and more of them right now, but we are in the throes of that. And so I've been pulling together a lot of our data for the state, and so I'm seeing what some of that looks like. Yeah, okay, it was you, Karen, good. So Louisa, what about undocumented citizens that want to become 4-H leaders? I am not sure what has happened in the past in Nevada. I know we ran into this issue when I was in Idaho, and I would need to go back. We've got to find a way to be able to include that audience in our programming, and so we'd have to work through the system. I know for a lot of the undocumented citizens, undocumented individuals, they don't necessarily like to fill out the paperwork, and the fingerprinting, is obviously a concern. So that would be something I think we would have to, at this point, take it on a case-by-case basis and try to work with probably Paul and Stephanie to see how we could do that. Because, like I said, we don't want to leave them out of our organization. And I can get a hold of some of those, like some of the other states, and find out how they've done it. That's a real possibility. I'm not, unfortunately, I'm not super familiar with a lot of the rules, but that's where we have our HR people to help us. So let's visit about that. But again, and we're going to run into that in every community that we have in Nevada. So as we look at also our rural versus urban, this is probably where we find one of our other biggest issues, when 80% of your population lives in an urban setting, but it's I can't remember what it is, like 20% of the land mass or something for the state of Nevada, 80% of people live in or something, but essentially it kind of fits with this same scenario that's on the screen right now of 62 million people, nearly 1 in 5 Americans live in rural areas, 250 million Americans live in urban cities, but 75% of the population shares about 3% of the US land area. And so when we think about that, we have a large concentration of people in a small area. And so, we have to think how we reach both our urban and our rural audiences. We have a lot of, in Nevada especially, we have a lot of people that live a long ways out of town, and how do we reach those communities? I've always said in counties, underserved audiences doesn't have to be one of these vulnerable populations. Maybe an underserved audience is a community that is, 50 to 100 miles away from the extension office, but still in your county. And that's very feasible. We all know in the state of Nevada to have those. Elko County is one example that could be, and I know I've talked to Jill a lot about it, is, so you think about Elko, the county seat is Elko, that's where the extension office is. What about Jackpot? Jackpot is a long ways away, but it's still part of Elko County. So how can, that's an underserved audience. And so what can we do to help with that? I know it sounds kind of, I have 5 of those. Yes, you have 5 of those towns, Sharon, definitely. McDermott, Orvada, you've got lots of that. And so, yep, we have that so much in our state, and much more so than I've ever seen in many communities. And so we have to think, so just think about what we're talking about today. It might be something about race, or it might be something about one of the other categories, but think about it in the urban versus rural, and those extreme rural. Okay, and the other piece that I think is important too is 15.4% of our rural citizens live in poverty compared to 11.9% of our urban residents. And so many times we think of, the low-income community, the low-income being in urban settings, that those are extreme poverty areas, but actually our rural areas are more prone to poverty. And so we need to be thinking about that as well. So some population growth projections. The white population is projected to peak in 2024, which is not very far from now, at 199.6 million, which it would be up from 197.8 million in 2012. The projection is that the white population is going to slowly decrease. The Black population is expected to increase from 41.2 million to 61.8 million over the same period, and their projection is for it to slightly rise by 2060. And the Asian population is expected to more than double before 2060. And the Hispanic population will more than double as well. They're looking at going from 53.3 million to 128.8 million in 2060. And so by 2060, 1 in 3 US residents will be Hispanic. And so it's something, I will not be around in 2060. I think it is, if I am, I'll be well over 100 and probably won't be paying attention to this. But as we are planning our programs, we need to be looking forward to that and developing programs that can be carried on and that are still, that can be still around in 2060. And then again, the population, you can see, this is just another graph, a US Census graph of where the projected population is going to be. So, and then we have our top 10 states. This was based in 2011 of the top 10 states with Latino populations. And so you can see, I think that this has probably changed a little bit, but I haven't been able to find a new graphic. So just to talk, because we know that the Latino and Hispanic population is going to be our largest population in not very many years, we need to be thinking about how can we reach those audiences? How can we change the perception of 4-H so that everybody feels welcome. And so you can see in 2010, there were 34.9% of Hispanics that were under the age of 18, and that compared to 20.9% of non-Hispanic whites. And then by 2018, which is in a year, it's projected that Latinos will make up 18% of our workforce, and then the share of young Latinos enrolled in college, it doubled from 2009 to 2010, and I think that is that's great, and that's where 4-H really can, that's where we can show that, because we know that our young people are more apt to go to college. So some health factors, these are things, as we're looking at programming, we need to keep these in mind. Hispanic children have the highest childhood obesity rate in the country, where 2 in 5 Hispanic children between ages 2 and 19 are overweight or obese. Latinos are disproportionately affected by HIV or AIDS, and they're 3 times more likely than their white counterparts to be infected. Latinas are 20% more likely to die from breast cancer than white women, and they exceed all other racial or ethnic groups with the largest percentage of reported tuberculosis cases. And then half of Latino youth born in the year 2000 are at risk for developing diabetes. So, question for you guys is, what does that tell me? Some 4-H programs that we could take to the Latino communities. In foods and nutrition, yep. Oh, sorry. So, as we look at these statistics, and we think about what are some 4-H programs that we could be taking to the Latino communities, what could those be? Offer a class to address cooking, looking at those SNAP, wellness, yep. I think that whole healthy living is an area, and when I've seen programs that have been successful, that's where they're successful. And part of that too is involving the entire family in those programs as well. So that's, as we're thinking about it, that's just something. Apply for SNAP grants. I'm not sure if 4-H can get specific SNAP grants, but we need to look at how can we partner with our SNAP Ed program to be offering. And I know a lot of our communities are, but that's something just to keep in the back of our mind. So some African American stats. So in 2010, Asian and then African American stats. In 2010, the largest Asian American populations were in California, New York, Hawaii, Texas, New Jersey, and Illinois. And the Asian American populations are typically in urban areas, with nearly 3/4 living in metropolitan areas. So I'm guessing that Las Vegas and Reno probably see a higher percentage of Asian Americans than maybe some of the other communities. And then you can see where the top 10 states for African Americans. Another piece, in 2009, the death rate for African Americans was higher than whites for health disease, stroke, cancer, asthma, influenza, pneumonia, diabetes, HIV, AIDS, and homicide. So, okay, cool. Thank you, Marguerite, for answering the question of, yes, we can apply for SNAP grants. I just need to find out how to do that, because I have not ever had that experience before, or how to go about doing that. But thank you. But you can see, again, as we take these healthy living programs to our Latina and Latino communities, same thing with our African American communities. That's another area that we could increase our programming. So as we look at our 4-H priority audiences, and these are priority audiences that have been established from USDA, and I think in as we look at this, I think they all fit. Rural youth, global youth, and then underserved and at-risk youth. When you think about rural youth, granted, 80% of our population is in urban communities, but I think we can, still take, there's still a need for our rural communities. We still have a lot of people out there, and so that's one. The other one is global youth, and I think that fits in with any of our communities as well. And then those underserved youth. So some youth population stats. Really, the proportion of population younger than 18 is expected to change just a little bit, actually decreasing between 2012 and 2060. Sometimes I wonder if part of that is because there's a lot more people choosing not to have children or choosing to have only one child. You can see population estimates show that 50.4% of children younger than 1 last year were Hispanic, Black, Asian American, or in another minority group. So they're 1 now. So 5 years we have to plan for those audiences. And then currently 16 million youth, or about 22% of our youth, live in poverty, and 45% of our children in the U.S. Live in a low income families. That's a great idea. Perhaps a standalone SNAP-Ed grant could be applied for around the 4-H science, the kitchen science. I think that would be a great idea, and something we could talk about and maybe get some programming throughout the entire state. I think that would be, I always think there's some grants out there through 4-H that are healthy living grants. Unfortunately, right now we don't have. There are only specific states that are eligible to apply for those, and so hopefully in the next couple of years that will change for us. But I'm always trying to look for those healthy living grants. The other audience that is a population that we have not talked a lot about, but it's an audience that is growing. I don't know if it's growing, it's just becoming more and more, we're becoming more and more aware of it, is our LGBTQ plus youth. And I know like I said, at the national level, this is especially in the Western region, this is an area that we are really having conversations about. How do we deal with this audience as far as policies? So many times, I think about camp. We have boys' cabins and we have girls' cabins. Well, if you have a young person that may be that identifies as a male, and maybe anatomically a female, we have to respect their identification, and so we have to think about all of those policies. There is a Western region team that is working on that, just to try to figure out how we can go about looking at those and looking at some of those policies. And Sarah Savilicek actually is sitting on that committee for Nevada, and so she's been sharing a few things. They haven't really come up with anything at this point, but it's something we need to probably do a lot more training, both with our staff and our volunteers. When we look at, there is 85% of the middle school and high school students who identify in this audience. said that they were verbally harassed at school in the past year. I think that that's something that within 4-H, part of our whole issue is belonging. We want kids to have a sense of belonging. And so part of that is we don't want them to be harassed. I was just reading something in the newspaper the other day and then sent it to my colleagues around the West. There was a young person in somewhere in the Midwest, I can't remember, that young man tried to join Cub Scouts and was denied because he was transgender, and obviously hadn't gone through any kind of surgeries, so anatomically he was still a female, but identified as a male, and they actually denied him enrollment in the Cub Scout program. And so I don't ever want to have our news article that makes the national headlines like that one did. And so it's just a whole new issue that we're having to look at. And I have got some great resources. And I will tell you, I am the first one when we go into these discussions. I've had this discussion many times with the other state program leaders. Yep, should be offering anti-bullying or acceptance tolerance training. And I actually have been working on trying to find some of that, Marguerite. I think that is, positive youth development. We are all about positive youth development, and we don't care, what color, what sex, what anything the child is. We just want them to have that positive experience. And so, but I have been the devil's advocate in a lot of these conversations of, in fact, I was talking to a fellow program leader, and they made the comment, when you go to a contest or when you go on a national trip, so you've got two boys that are assigned to room together. One of them ends up in the LGBTQ plus community or population, and the other one, might be I always say, a kid that's living on the ranch 100 miles from town, not having the exposure to the world like, some of our other youth, and they don't feel comfortable in the other young person. And I was told one time, well, then your youth just, your youth that's, 100 miles from town just needs to learn to deal with it. And I said, no, our job is to make everybody feel emotionally and physically safe. And I can't control what that young person's values are, so we've got to figure out how to approach it from both sides. And so just because I know that is, a big issue of, our job is to make everybody feel emotionally and physically safe while being tolerant, or not tolerant, but being not activists, but not providing a safe environment for all young people. So so we need to think about, and this is just something that we can, this is something for you to think about. And so what is the greatest opportunity, do you think, to reach underserved audiences in your community? Can anybody, so examples, STEM, healthy living, food security, think about these kinds of questions. What do we need to do to position ourselves for the changing demographics? What partners are needed? And what are the opportunities and the challenges for that? So any thoughts? I love Marguerite's idea of the anti-bullying or acceptance. And the SNAP Ed, that's another one, to try to find some funding to help. Okay, recruited events that are targeted to underserved populations, that could be another one. Everybody's just kind of thinking, aren't they? Hopefully. But that's something I think to have those, events like camps. Yep, Spanish curriculum. Yes, I agree completely, Louisa, and I'm hoping that we can start working towards some of that. Having all of our forms in Spanish, that's another big one. Providing training to our leaders and volunteers, yes. So as we think about these vulnerable populations, number one, we talked about the amount of those individuals that live in poverty. So one of the things is we need to take programs to their community where they live, and then also we also need to train our current leaders and our current volunteers about the programming that's being done. The other piece I always think about too is we need to think about, we go to these audiences, and one thing, I was talking to Arizona the other day, and they just got done with their federal civil rights audit, and they were dinged in their audit for their big, where all of their diversity comes from in their programming, comes from our special interests and the in school and the after school and those programs, not necessarily the 4-H club. And honestly, I have a feeling that that's going to be one of our comments that's made, because as I looked at our club program, most of our club membership is majority white, middle class. And so part of that is we need to think about what a club looks like. And I've had a lot of conversations with Las Vegas about, what that club looks like. You still need to be using research-based materials and some of those pieces, but we need to look at, do they have to, go to the fair? Do they have to do all of the things that we traditionally think that 4-H kids need, 4-H members need to do? And so I think that needs to be a topic that is talked about in the next couple of years of how do we look at 4-H clubs. I know that California has done a really good job looking at programs. Oregon has done an outstanding job looking at what that looks like. And how do they have access to all of our opportunities? How do we open those opportunities? Maybe they're not in a club program, but they're involved in an after-school program. So how do we open our opportunities for national trips? Right now, I know that currently we don't have a lot of money to support those young people, which unfortunately is a huge barrier. And I'm working, I'd love to get that figured out so we can offer those opportunities to some of our, to all youth that participate, not necessarily our club members, but our 4-H participants. So next, when we think about it, we need to focus on intention, focus on need, and focus on outcome, and then focus on our future. And I think you guys have come up with some really good ideas. This might be, we're starting to get some things rolling in Nevada, which I think is fantastic. And I think this might be something in the next year or two that we need to get really thinking about, is how do we reach these vulnerable or underserved audiences. So then beyond just reaching these audiences, we also do have, we are guided by civil rights. And so because we are a government agency, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about this. We're going to be going through our audit, and I can tell you I've been through one of these before. Nobody is perfect. Everybody does all kinds of things. And none of it is intentional, and I know that, but I just wanted to remind everybody about some of these pieces. So we do have a policy that we are non-discriminatory based on race, religion, color, national origin, sex, age, sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, disability, or veteran status. And so this is one of the reasons why we always are talking about religion, and why we have, you know, I know that several counties have had individuals that have wanted to bring religion into their 4-H programming, you know, have a Bible study, those types of things, and we have said, no, we can't do that because 4-H is, you know, because we are a non-discriminatory. That's part of the other reason why we have the conversations about the prayer at 4-H events. I know that that sounds, okay, it can be held at a faith-based institution, yes, because sometimes those are the sites that you have, but everybody needs to realize that they are not necessarily, you know, that's just the location because it's in the community. Yep. And so, yeah, that is definitely, and we will, I can almost guarantee you, Marguerite, we are going to get dinged in our audit too about not having advisory boards for 4-H. We don't have advisory boards anywhere in Extension. And so again, that's another topic that we need to be tackling in the next year or two, is how do we establish some 4-H expansion and review committees or advisory boards to where we can expand our programming. But anyway, we talked about, yeah, so when you talk about the invocation, so that's where I was going, Jasmine. It is really recommended, and I know that there have been lawsuits that have happened to 4-H for prayer at events. And so what we recommend is that you either have a moment of silence and allow people to, you know, to do what, you know, to give that moment of silence and let people do what they want. They want to pray, they can, if, you know, or to do a thought of the day, or I mean a thought or a poem, but preferably, I will tell you that it is not recommended, and really goes against our non-discriminatory policy to have a prayer at an event. The reason, you know, I think about it, so my son's best friend is Muslim, and if, you know, being in a 4-H club or 4-H, being at a 4-H program, he may be, you know, we're not all, you know, if somebody gives a prayer and, you know, prays to, you know, a certain God, then, you know, that's not reaching him. And so we just have to think about all of the potential. Now, I know, I will tell you right away, in the small rural communities, I know it is just the way people are, and they get very offended when you tell them, please, you know, we can't pray at 4-H events. But like I said, I do know when I was in Michigan, there was a neighboring county that had a lawsuit going on from an atheist who was offended by prayers at every 4-H event. And so I am, so, you know, it's a tough thing. It's really hard. It drives me crazy more than anything. I always say the worst thing in the world for me is when I go to a 4-H event and they start off with a prayer and my gut just goes, ugh, because it's such a confliction for me. I truly believe in the power of prayer, but I know that at our 4-H events, we are a government entity. We are, you know, non-discriminatory, and we have to respect all religions, and not all religions pray the same way. So does that help? Kind of, I know that was a really long answer, and I might have gotten, yes. Although we don't have advisory boards in Extension, yes, 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 yes. definitely be a part of other agency advisory boards. One of the things that I would love for us, especially in 4-H, to really try to be the leaders in is a youth coalition in your community where you bring together all of the youth serving organizations and really have those discussions about what are the needs of our youth, both with young people and with the frontline workers, the people that are working in that field. Some of my best experiences were on those types of boards. When I worked in Michigan, I served on both a tribal, we had a big tribal community, and I served on their tribal youth board where we talked a lot about tribal programs, what we could be doing for youth in the tribal community. And 4-H was right there at the table, and we were doing programs with them probably, at least on a weekly basis, if not more. And then also we had one within the town and the county that I worked in. And man, in fact, we had our total youth advisory board, and then we had an America's Promise board, and we had an anti-smoking board, and we had our anti-tobacco, and we had like all these different shoot-offs. And so I got involved in a lot of those different programs, and it was great because I was able to take positive youth development to those other organizations. And I did a lot of training around just that area of positive youth development and experiential learning with these other organizations to try to get them to do more hands-on. So, okay, and then this is our USDA, again, not only do we have our issues at the federal or at the state level, we also have guidelines at the federal level. So basically, we need to think about, all of our program participants are making decisions and carrying out actions on behalf of extension programming. And we're responsible, it's our jobs to make sure that our programs are inclusive for everybody. So just a couple of things. Certified, screened, and enrolled volunteers working in extension programs are responsible to follow our policies, our extension policies. And if we find some of those barriers, like Louisa talked about, are undocumented citizens. So we need to figure out how can we work with that audience to open up the program to them, to make it so that we are inclusive of that audience. And I think there's ways that we can do all kinds of programs. Okay, and that could very well be that it was, they serve on a member of a community advisory board. Things have changed a lot. There's some things that, some things I think are important, and in our communities, I think it's always important that 4-H and extension, 4-H youth development and extension be at the table when talking about youth issues. That way, it elevates our programming. People don't think of us just as an events program or just the fair. They actually see that we are teaching positive youth development. So just really quick, some barriers on this. Sorry, I'm just looking at the time. Okay, some barriers to help participants identify, these are some potential barriers. So these are some barriers to the civil rights law, things like language, culture, economics, access, and then special communication needs. So also could be distance and location, those underserved audiences, learning abilities, and special needs. So language barriers should not limit our program participation. I think it is, when we talk about needing more Spanish, more publications in Spanish, I completely agree. We just have to, we need to work on figuring out what are the most critical, because it is not a cheap thing to get publications in Spanish. I know in Idaho, we were spending about $75 an hour to get a bunch of the publications translated into Spanish, which is critical, and it's a great use of our resources. It's just, obviously we wouldn't be able to say, okay, everything we have needs to be translated at this moment. We'd have to decide what those, yes, and then figuring out programming for the special needs. So when I get to that one, I'm going to talk about that because I found a great idea the other day. So as things come up, let me know. And I know at one time somebody in Las Vegas told me there were like 271 different languages spoken in the city of Las Vegas. I can tell you, we probably won't be able to get our publications translated into 271 languages, but I think, if we can, if you've got, we know the Spanish language is one of our big areas. Yes, and there are, well, so 4-H staff, I will tell you, the problem with that, Louisa, is most states hire it out because most of the staff will not translate it because they feel like they want to make sure it's as professional. So there are a lot of professional translators, and so we can get it. I mean, and a lot of states have already done most of the work. Oregon has probably 75% of their stuff translated into Spanish, but they've been working on it for 20 years. Idaho's got a lot more translated, and so we'll get there. We'll get there. We can get it done. But if we have another big population that needs to have publications, translated, then we can figure out how to do that. Then we have cultural barriers. We think about scheduling events to conflict with major religious or ethnic holidays or events. Now, I know we said that we are open to all, but we also need to be cognizant of what those events, what events are happening. You probably, if you've got a large Jewish population in your community, you probably do not want to schedule an event on, oh gosh, I can't even, sorry, my brain just completely faded. Or if you've got a Muslim community, you do not, you need to think about those programs and really be kind of aware. It's the same as if we've got a school. We work around school calendars. We need to be thinking about some of those things. Staging activities or events and potentially uncomfortable, churches, bars, or private clubs, or locations where groups were previously rejected. I said that they can be at churches, and I think that that's fine, especially if that church is known as a community center. I know when I was in Eureka, a month or two ago, one of the churches there is the community center. It just happens to also be a church. And so, but it's open as a community center as well. I think that those, and sometimes in small communities, that is where you meet. That's fine. Probably don't want to have as many youth programs at bars, but I haven't seen some. And again, we want to look at what, continues to engage. Yeah. And yes, they would, Oregon and Idaho will be more than willing to share that. Most of it is already online. So if you just go to their online, go to their websites, it's already on there. But they would be willing to share. And a lot of the communities, Texas has got a lot in Spanish. You just have to go out and find it. But, and then also program activities that include food and activities that are insensitive to religious or cultural, dietary, and behavior restrictions. Again, if we have a Muslim, if you have a large Muslim, large participation from the Muslim community, you want to make sure that you're not serving meat, like pork, and especially pork. Let me tell you, I knew nothing about the Muslim community until my son started being friends with Zaid, and man, we are learning a lot, and it is phenomenal. I love it, and I'm getting to figure it out. One night, all the boys, we had probably, 5 or 6 of the neighborhood boys, all were over for dinner, and I had brought pizza, and I had pepperoni pizza and a cheese pizza, and I was like, oh, thank you that I thought to bring a cheese pizza, because I didn't even think about Zaid not being able to eat the pepperoni until he said, is there any that doesn't have, pork and beef on it, or pork and meat on it? And so, just thinking about those things, having those options. Economic barriers, so those conditions that exclude participation, where we have a high cost. I know currently, we don't have a high cost to participate in 4-H. I hope that if your county has participation fees, which is fine to collect, because we have to be able to self-sustain our programming. But I'm hoping that if you do truly have a family that cannot afford those participation fees, you're figuring out a way for them to participate. Basically programs, that are conducted based on a high level of income, and then programs that conducted which require extensive purchases of equipment or supplies. This is one where we sometimes run into issues with shooting sports. That's part of the reason why we like to encourage counties to try to get county shooting sports equipment that young people can use, so they don't have to buy their own. But there sometimes it just is what it is. It's the same, if a young person wants to take a beef project, they have to be able to afford to purchase the animal and then purchase the feed and everything to go with it. And then access barriers, we think about facilities. We want to make sure that facilities that are used, and this is something that we can share with our volunteers too, if they've got a young person with a physical disability, they need to make sure that their meetings are in a location that are easily accessible for wheelchairs, etc. And then if there isn't, where wheelchair access cannot be provided permanently, there needs to be, signage, etc., on how to do that. And I know most of our extension offices should be ADA compliant. When I was at the county in Idaho the first time, our office was not ADA compliant. Sorry, and we had to make a big change to that. And then communication needs, if you have somebody that is hearing, okay, Lyon County is partially compliant. I think that's that's something, we just need to think about that. If you have somebody that is hearing impaired, and I don't know what the rule is in Nevada, I should find that out, that they, if you have a program, you need to provide a interpreter, and that is, and that can be very costly. And so I need to find out what that rule is in Nevada. We don't typically, that's not typically with 4-H. Usually they'll have their own. And Brianna, I will get you to your question in just a second. I see it there. But we need to think about, they will typically bring their own interpreter, but we have those, if we have hearing or vision impaired, we have to make exceptions. One of the things too, so I've been in a community where we had a young person that wanted to show a steer that was wheelchair bound, and so we figured out a way, because we couldn't say no, and so we figured out a way to allow them to show. Basically, their steer was like a baby, just followed the wheelchair around, but she also had an adult walking with her in the class, both in quality and in showmanship, to ensure that there was for the safety factor. And the same thing, if you've got a hearing impaired or a vision impaired, we just need to figure out how to make it work. So yes, yeah, the Fresno Fair, they do it. People do it all the time. So our county has a 2-year breeding rule in order to show and sell market animals. Yeah, that needs to be that probably needs to be addressed. You know, when we think about market, you know, that's really not falling under necessarily our civil rights issues, but that is a fairness issue, and an access issue. You know, if you're not breeding animals, which most people don't have breeding, you know, most kids that take market animals don't have the breeding stock or breeding animals as well. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about that and see what can be done. Yeah. So some other barriers, just really quick. So the low income or the limited resource audiences, you need to make, you know, those programs should really be accessible, probably within walking distance. And then families with small children, single parents, two earner households, or other underserved audiences may not be able to participate in extension events because of certain days of the week or certain times. And so we need to think about some of those things. You know, I know most of our stuff happens in the evenings, but sometimes not necessarily. Let's see, other barriers, learning situations, you know, where we have subject matter content, if you have a learning disability. So just figuring out ways that we can do that. And essentially it comes down to, we need to plan our programs in anticipation of special needs. So what can we do to think about minimizing those barriers? When I talked about risk management before, it's kind of the same thing. You know, we think about risk management. We also need to think about barriers to participation. And then, and Jasmine, I see that question too. So essentially in 4-H, you know, our job is to provide that positive youth development experience. We want kids to feel that sense of belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. And so, you know, that is our goal. We need to keep that in mind. So about livestock sales being on Sunday, I know there's a lot because of religious being on Sunday. Yeah, they are required to find a buyer before. Okay, so if they don't, so I have actually dealt with this, actually with the sale being on Saturday, and a Seventh-day Adventist family that did not want to participate in the sale. And I had to go right to the university attorney. This wasn't here, it was in another state, but basically that is not discriminatory because they know what the date of that sale is when they sign up for the project. And so they have to, if that makes sense, you know, we have to be kind of aware of that situation. We know that Sunday is traditionally a religious day for most religions, but there are some that are on Saturday as well. And so, but it came down to kind of the final ruling was they knew what the date was of that sale before they signed up for the project. So they made that decision to participate at that point. So we didn't have to make any special arrangements. So, okay. Good. Hopefully I answered that. And then again, here's just some specific. And then just a last thought on diversity is, and I love this one, we all learn from crayons, you know, some are sharp, some are dull, some are pretty, some of them have weird names, and they're all different colors, but they all live in the same box. And we have to remember that when we are thinking about our programming that we're doing, is we all live in the same box, but none of us are the same. And so how do we go about doing the things that we that we need to get done with that? All right, any questions on that? Great discussions, I love it. This is one of those, this is a topic that is a really hard one to have discussions on because so many people are scared of offending or or saying the wrong thing. And I try, I'm at the point now where I'm like, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm going to ask a lot of questions, and it's something we have to bring to the front. So I'm showing that we have about a half an hour left, and I do have another topic. Some of you have seen this before, but a lot of you have not. And if you have, I think it's still a good reminder because it's been about a year since you saw it. And so I'm going to, let me do this really quick and start. So we're going to kind of switch gears a lot and talk now about personal and professional satisfaction. Kind of comes down to that whole work-life balance. We're in the process of working on every 3 years. For the Western region offers a training for new 4-H staff. So many of you, if you were around, and I hope that all of you are still around in 2018, and I know Karen went to the training already, and it seems like maybe one other person, but they offer what they call the Western Institute for 4-H Youth Development. It is meant for people within the first 5 years of their profession. Jasmine, yes. So that is going to happen in February of 2018. And so we've been talking a lot about what are topics for this training. And one of those pieces is, one of those big topics is letting all of our new staff know that this job can be consuming, and you have to learn how to, you have to learn how to balance things. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of research out there now that says that work-life balance is a joke. It's not, so Molly, there isn't one for 2017. There is one it's going to be February of 2018. So they offer it every 3 years. So the last one was in 2015, and so 2018, and it's in Fort Collins, Colorado. I can even tell you, I think it's at the Marriott. We already have the hotel and everything for it. So I just happen to serve on that planning committee as well as Sarah does from Sarah's Vilicek. So, but anyway, so work-life balance is never ever going to happen. What I found, and I love this approach to it, is you have to figure out where you find satisfaction, both at the personal level and the professional level. No, Molly, and I'll talk about that one. There is a national meeting for 4-H professionals that happens every year. So this one's just every 3 years. But we want, so I want to talk about what this means to have this kind of finding that personal and professional satisfaction. Because I will tell you, you're not going to be satisfied with what's happening professionally all the time. You're not going to be satisfied with what's happening at the personal level all the time. And so you have to figure out, that's okay. And so hopefully some of this will help you. And if I don't get through all of this, then I will share with you the resource. Part of it comes from, I want to go back. Most of it comes from a book called Off Balance, and it's by Matthew Kelly. And the resource is in the back. And I highly, highly recommend that everybody try to get a copy of that, to get a copy and to read that book, because it made a difference for me in what I was doing, especially after I had a family. It really made a difference in the way I thought about things. So as you think about this, can you think about what the difference between balance and satisfaction is? And is it truly possible to have balance between your personal and your professional life? We think about, is it better to know that it won't be possible, and to find that place where you can be satisfied, lowering your standards? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes you just have to say, you know what, it's not the way I want it to be, but it has to go. It just has to be the way. when you ask the question, would you rather have balance or satisfaction? Most people, not very many people, choose balance. They really, they want to live a life that is satisfying, that's deeply satisfying, both in your personal, yeah, it's pretty tough to have balance. I mean, you can, but you're not going to be happy with either one if you do have that balance. And so you want that satisfaction. So hopefully this will give you some ways, some tips. So just a little bit of brief history, about work-life balance was really a term created probably, just have a section where a person is a student, family, work, yes, and a calling from church. Oh, believe me, it is crazy. But this is a way that, you can work through that. So it's a term that was introduced about 25 years ago, and what they found was it was the biggest blunder in corporate America. 70% of the employees said that they work less, they have less work-life balance than they did 10 years ago. And I know I have found that when I started working in extension, it seemed like we did have some slow times when I started working in 4-H. Now there's no slow times at all. When you introduce people to help people deal with those mounting pressures, and I'll tell you, I mean, I'm going to be real honest with you, there are times that this job can be very, very time consuming. You're going to have a lot of pressure on you, and hopefully it doesn't happen at, both at work and at home at the same time. But you know what? Those worlds collide. It's kind of like what happened in Reno, where they had like kind of I can't remember what they called the storm that we just got done that caused the flooding. But, it's kind of that perfect storm where they just collide, and, it just gets crazy. But when you basically you are separating your work life from your personal life when you talk about work-life balance, and that's really not possible. When is your work not a part of your life? And they're saying now that the average person spends more time working each day than they do anything else. And yeah, you go to work from 8 to 5, and you're only home from say 5:30, and then go to bed by 10. That's not a lot of difference. And so that's why when asked on a employee satisfaction surveys, most people do not respond favorably to work-life balance questions. So we have to think about them separately to think about the insight to it, knowing that they're not separate, though. They're always. So an example of that, when you show up to work and one of your family members is homesick, you're going to be distracted at work. You're going to be disengaged. And the same thing goes for when you have something great happen at work. You go home with a positive energy, and you want to go home and share that success with your family. And so there's not that change. And so a lot of companies have been renaming it work-life effectiveness. It's that discovering that the personal and professional life are deeply linked. So I'm going to share a story with you about a fisherman. So a vacationing American businessman standing on the pier of a quaint coastal fishing village in southern Mexico watched as a small boat with just one young Mexican fisherman pulled into the dock. Inside the small boat were several large yellowfin tuna. Enjoying the warmth of the afternoon sun, the American complimented the Mexican on the quality of his fish. "How long did it take you to catch them?" the American casually asked. "Oh, a few hours," the Mexican fisherman replied. Why don't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" the American businessman then asked. The Mexican warmly replied, "With this, I have more than enough to meet my family's needs." The businessman became serious. But what do you do with the rest of your time?" Responding with a smile, the Mexican fisherman answered, "I sleep late, play with my children, watch ball games, and take a siesta with my wife. Sometimes in the evenings, I take a stroll into the village to see my friends, play the guitar, and sing a few songs." The American businessman impatiently interrupted, "Look, I have an MBA from Harvard, and I can help you to become more profitable. You can start by fishing several hours longer each day, and then you can sell the extra fish you catch. With the extra money, you can buy a bigger boat. With the additional income the larger boat will bring, before long you could with the additional income that the larger boat will bring, before long you can buy a second boat, then a third one, and so on, until you have an entire fleet of fishing boats." Proud of his own sharp thinking, he excitedly elaborated a grand scheme which would bring even bigger profits. "Then, instead of selling your catch to the middleman, you'll be able to sell your fish directly to the processor, or even open up your own cannery. Eventually, you could control the product, processing, and distribution. You could leave this tiny coastal village, move to Mexico City, or even possibly Los Angeles or New York, where you could even further expand your enterprise." Having never thought of such things, the Mexican fisherman asked, "But how long will this all take?" In a rapid mental calculation, the Harvard MBA announced, "Probably about 15 to 20 years, maybe less if you work really hard." "Then what, senor?" asked the fisherman. "Well, why, that's the best part," asked the businessman with a laugh. When the time is right, you will sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You would make millions." "Millions? Really? What would I do with it all?" asked the young fisherman in disbelief. The businessman boasted, "Then you could happily retire with all of the money you've made. You could move to a quaint coastal village where you could sleep late, play with your grandchildren, watch ball games, and take a siesta with your wife. You would stroll to the village in the evenings where you could play the guitar and sing with your friends all you want." So, okay, so we look at that story. So do we, who knows what the moral of that story is? He's already doing that. It's all about perspective, yep. And so part of it, live life while you can. Know that what really matters in life, and that you may find it already much closer than you think. And so, yep, you guys were all right. So how does that relate to what I'm talking about? Well, we look at satisfaction versus pleasure and kind of some of those best ways to live. Okay. Oops. Sorry, I need to go back. So satisfaction versus pleasure. So there is a fundamental, I think I want to be the fisherman. I know. Fundamental difference between pleasure and satisfaction is that pleasure cannot be sustained beyond the activity that's producing it. So an example of that is eating. 75% of the time when we eat not because we're hungry, it's just for the pleasure of eating. How many of us do that? We want that extra little snack or whatever. And satisfaction is sustained beyond the activity that's producing it. So the people, the places, the things, and the activity have brought satisfaction, will continue to bring satisfaction. So, you may eat for pleasure, but when and then it's gone. As soon as you're done eating, that pleasure is gone. But when you look at things that cause you satisfaction, I'm trying to find some new skill, or some new hobbies, because I was finding myself, I'll be honest, I was finding myself, I'd go home from work and I would, make dinner and clean up, and then, spend a little bit of time trying to help my son with his homework. Then he goes to bed, and as soon as he goes to bed, I'll pull I was pulling my computer back out and doing more and more work. And I was finding that I wasn't having that level of satisfaction in either place. And so I'm trying to find some new hobbies. And, and so part of that is finding that satisfaction, where I have that home, where I feel like I'm not working all the time. And then we look at, the best ways to live. When you ask most people, what's the best way to live? Rarely does it become a comprehensive strategy. These ideas are, come from a website called beststuff.com. best ways to live, being an individual, getting lost in music, living instead of existing. A lot of things that you guys have said here, doing what you want, when you want, and not having, going back to the story of the tortoise and the hare, going back to the fisherman story. Because the list is random, we find that many people, we look at this list. It's not a comprehensive strategy on how to live, the best way to live. It's, very random. And that's how most people approach life, is very randomly. But yet we expect them to work very strategically. And so that's probably the single largest deficit in the whole work-life balance quest. It's not an entitlement or a benefit, nor can it be something that your company gives you, or that extension can give you. It's something you need to create for yourself. And so how do we do that? And this is a way, now you're not going to be able to do the indicator. I will send that to you. You're not going to be able to do it today, but there is a personal and professional satisfaction indicator that you can take. And I know Karen and Charlene and Jay, I think you're the only one, and Sharon, I think you guys are the only ones that are on staff. Maybe Samantha, I think Samantha. When we did this at the training a year ago, I think you guys are the only ones that are still here. You did take this. I'm gonna suggest that you do it again. So you see if you've changed it all. So basically you score and all those directions, but they come around, they're in an area, they talk about disposition and interest. There's a personal inventory and a professional inventory. So I'm gonna skip over this part, because you'll see all of these when you get it. So this whole personal and professional satisfaction. So some people have decided that professional satisfaction is not possible, but I don't believe that that is the case. Anybody that works in extension, anybody that works in 4-H does not believe that there is not satisfaction. I mean, it may not be immediate satisfaction, but it is there. I mean, I have personal satisfaction all the time in my job. For me now, that personal satisfaction is seeing our staff be successful in the programming that they've tried, as well as seeing our youth be successful as well. That to me gives me a big sense of professional satisfaction. Basically, the key is it's impossible to completely separate the two. And so you have to remember, remember our sick family, it's a personal thing, but you're going to be distracted at work. And so we have to figure out how to balance that. It's great in theory, but it doesn't work. And so an example of that, I love this example. When New Coke came out with their formula, there's a lot of you on here that didn't even know that there was a different formula for Coke. That's why it's called now Coca-Cola Classic instead of just Coca-Cola. Or Crystal Pepsi. When they came out with their clear Crystal Pepsi, they were great in theory, but huge flops. Thus now why we are back to Coca-Cola Classic and regular Pepsi. So just knowing that, sometimes things are great in theory, but they just don't work. So as we look at 5 ways to increase our personal and professional satisfaction, this is really where it goes into the kind of the meat. Can you have it all? A reasonable person is really going to answer no to that, but you can work and strive towards being that better person and how to make different choices or better choices. You can come pretty close. And if you want to achieve that, personal and professional satisfaction, there is a way to approach it kind of strategically. You're not going to wake up one morning and find out that you stumbled upon the answers to the world or stumbled into a life of satisfaction. You have to be intentional about it. So one of the ways is the assessment. So I will be sending you that assessment. That way you can figure out where your level of dissatisfaction is coming from, and then you can work through this process to increase that. So you can see, pinpointing where that dissatisfaction is. They're saying a suggestion for this is take the assessment once every 3 months for the first year, and then twice a year after that, so you know where that is. There is, if you go to floydconsulting.com, you can take the assessment online. What it does is it generates a report for you each time you take it, and then it allows you to track your progress. And I think that I really like that. And then you can, look through these. And then you need to set your priorities. So after you take the assessment, it's important to determine what matters the most. Without understanding or having that clear sense of our priorities, you think everything's important. And so that means that nothing's important. And, this goes along with our work. So many times in 4-H, our 4-H stakeholders think that everything is, that their problem is the most important. And sometimes we have to remind them, it's that priority setting process for us. And sometimes, it's maybe not as important for you to deal with right then. You've got another pressing issue. But essentially, they're saying make a list of all of the aspects of your life. So here we've got children, finances, health, work and career, and social life. Reduce that list to about 5 or 6 that you consider the most important in your life, and then conduct a priority exercise on those 5 or 6 aspects. So how you do this is you go through and think about children and finances. So which one is more of a priority to you? Children to health. Which one is more of a priority? Children to work and career, children to social life. So look at each of those comparatively, and then put a check mark next to each one, and compare each, to the one that you feel is your priority. And I know for me, probably children is my number one. It's gonna trump everything. And many of you, know that about me, that, if my son has something happening, I make it my priority to be at that event, or to make sure that I am supporting him. Yeah, Trisha, the same for me. I know that is my number one priority. Probably number 2, honestly, for me, is my work and career, and then social life, and my health is probably the worst, which is not good. I've worked a lot of places to talk about. They want the work to be the highest priority, and I'm glad that you feel like this is an organization that values time with your family. I know I really try to stress that is, our family is critical, and work can't be our priority. Sometimes it does take priority. I mean, it just happens. This weekend, I didn't get to spend time with my family because I was holed up trying to get those reports done for USDA, and that's fine. I knew that, and I explained it to them, and they understood it, and they know that's sometimes it is. But and then there's a worksheet on a weekly strategy session, which is step 4 to review the priority. And so there's actually a worksheet at this Floyd Consulting. I'm going to say you should go to that Floyd Consulting website and look at they have so many resources. But again, it's really good to reassess your priorities about once or twice a year. And then we have core habits. Sorry, I'm looking at time. Okay, I have about 5 minutes. So think about our core habits. How does your best day begin? Does anybody want to share how your best day begins? Have you ever been asked that question? Anybody want to answer how your best day begins? Okay, with coffee, yes, sleeping in. Not being woken up by a crying baby. Oh gosh, I remember those days. Yes. When your dog's breakfast is eaten before I leave the house. For me, it's my animal or my son's breakfast has been eaten before I leave the house, because then I know I don't have to call him and keep harping on him. I mean, we all have those, yes. I love these. And so, Trisha, kids wake up, get dressed, and prepare for their own breakfast and lunch, and are ready for school. Gosh, that would be nice. Wake up rested, sun is shining. Yeah, I only have 4 fur kids. Exactly. I mean, it's just we all have our, we all have those. For me, last night, it was not being woke up, as Jasmine talked about, not being woken up by a crying baby. Last night, I was woken up twice by a whining dog who thought he needed to go outside at 1:30 in the morning. And so, it's a good day when he doesn't wake me up at 1:30 in the morning. But when you think about that, and my own experience says, if your day doesn't start out good, then it's not likely going to end good. It's not going to end up as a great day. Once we allow our day to get away from us, we go into survival mode. And, so it's creating some core habits to help make our day begin correctly. So those are those daily habits to help you keep healthy, focused, and energized. And the key to this is they need to be specific goals, they need to be measurable, and they need to be realistic. What are components that you can guarantee are going to cause you to have a great day? So, one example for a lot of people is waking up and 45-minute workout in the morning, or spending 30 minutes of meditation in the morning. That's how a great day starts for them. I know for my own husband, I can tell when he hasn't, he goes to work at 5:30 in the morning, and he gets up at about 3:30 in the morning, so he can get in about 45 minutes of a workout. And that he has to start his day that way, or he says if he doesn't really start his day that way, he's really sluggish. And this is a man that walks 5 to 8 miles at work a day, and so he really doesn't need that 45 minutes of exercise, but it's just his way of waking up, and it's his way of getting the day started. So again, that's a measurable, realistic goal. So how do we develop core habits? We start with one core habit. So when you ask yourself, what would be a game changer for my days? What one thing, if done every day, would change my life a lot? So, part of that, when the dog's breakfast is eaten before I leave for the house. So maybe that core habit is making sure that the dog gets their food early enough that they have time to eat that. Or we wake our kids up, or, make sure their alarms are set in time for them in time for them, and they're not rushed. And so when you identify, or if you need to work out, I have 30 minutes of me time, if I could have 30 minutes of me time. And, I have a good friend of mine from college that she wakes up at 4:30 in the morning. She's a school teacher, and she spends 30 minutes reading some kind of book, to inspirational book, and then she spends 30 minutes working out. And so, but she needs that, and it's before anybody else in the house wakes up. And she said she needs that time, that me time. That's the only, that's where she can find her me time. Now, granted, I'm not willing to wake up at 4:30 in the morning for that. But when you think about it, how can you create that me time? So, and we just all have to think about what is that one thing, so identifying that first core habit, measure it. When you're able to follow that habit 80% of the time, then you can add another core habit. New law in France that bans work emails after working hours. Wow, that would be crazy, wouldn't it? Early last week, I emailed the state program leader in Texas, and I said, hey, I hear you're the man to go to for federal civil rights audit. Can we set up a time in the next day or so we can visit? He emailed me back 10 o'clock Pacific time, which is midnight for him. And I said, wow, looks like you're working on all state. And there must have been three or four different people that we were all emailing, all different, like state program leaders, and we were all emailing, and it was after 10 p.m. Pacific time, which I'm on the, I'm the earliest of everybody. And so, that's a good core habit. If you think about it, quit checking email after a certain time. So I love that law. But having the phone and having a laptop, it's a little more challenging at times. And then follow, so here we go. No nights or weekends. Yeah, unfortunately, that's not necessarily a habit that we can follow as far as within 4-H. But I will tell you, as a 4-H professional, because we work a lot of nights and weekends, I do not have a problem. And I would go to bat for you to block out. One of your core habits is you block out one weekend a month that you're not going to work, and you can, and block out 1 to 2 nights a week that you're not going to work. That is, your time. Because if you don't, it will become all-consuming. I know when I was at the county, I would work 5 nights a week and then 1 to 2 days on the weekend. Probably, there were times I would go 2-3 months with never having a weekend off, and you cannot do that your level of satisfaction is gonna decrease. And so that's a core habit of blocking out a weekend that you're not gonna work, and you have to remain firm to it, and you have to remain firm. And it's taken me 24 years to learn that, so don't think it comes overnight. But I would go to bat, with one of your supervisors for that. Okay, I'm showing it is 2:30, and basically the next 2 steps are, 2 steps are talking about strategy sessions. So basically looking at, once a week, really thinking about, at the beginning of the week, review your weekly schedule, schedule your key projects for times that you work best. I think it is really important that you know when your most productive time of the day is. For me, I honestly know that between 9 and 11 is my most productive time. That is both AM and PM. If I need to do something that causes me that I need to think a lot on, I have to do that between 9 and 11. I can do it AM or PM. And I will schedule myself to do that. Most afternoons I will schedule myself to not, to do, and even to teach like this. I'm okay teaching like this in the afternoon, but to prepare, I'm not good in the afternoon. So it's really important. And then keeping that schedule and those core habits in plain sight. Thinking about those to-do lists. And then you have that quarterly review. One of the things that they talk about is finding someone that you can talk to about this, and that will be honest with you. You can read what that says, but essentially, having that review to make sure you're following the policies. So as we look at this, is the answer the same of choosing, which one would you choose? Are you willing to do something about the dissatisfaction in your life? And I will tell you that probably 4-H professionals have a really high burnout rate because of the amount of work that we have to do and the amount of people we answer to, and so trying to figure this out, I think, is really critical. So this is the book, and then the website that goes with the book. Like I said, I would highly suggest to people that I've had a couple of friends that work in extension in other states that have bought this book, and they're like, oh my gosh, this makes such sense. And it really does kind of help put life into perspective. Obviously, it's a lot thicker book and a lot more time and a lot more information than I can share in this small amount of time. But And I do have a copy. I'm not sure. I think it's still in a box in my garage, but I do have a copy of this book. So when I find it, if people want to borrow it, they're more than welcome to. I try to pull it out, on a regular basis to remember these things. But any questions? And Molly, to answer your question about when the 4-H conference is, it's the National Association of 4-H Agents, and it is November, I've got it, November 12th through the 16th in Indianapolis this year. And that information should be coming out fairly soon. Yeah. Okay, if there's no other questions, thank you, everybody. I kept you 5 minutes longer. I'm sorry. I think we had fantastic discussions today. I love it. It's the whole working with vulnerable audiences is an area that we need to start addressing. It's a, yeah. Oh, good. Thank you. You're off to practice balance. Good. But yeah, it's something we need to address in the future. I'm hoping we can get to it sooner than later, but have a great rest of the week. Reminder, we do have the coffee hour in the morning, so feel free, try to join us if you can. If not, have a great week. Thanks.